to Alifereal. My name is Darren Humphreys in Christchurch, New Zealand, and we're telling stories from the journey. And with me is my co-host, all the way from the United Kingdom, Paul Byrne. Good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning, Darren. It's nearly 2:30 in the early hours of the morning here in the UK, but yes, pleased to be here. Looking forward to this this episode's guest. So yeah, let's bring it on, Darren.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Really lining things up, and we should also just point out that there's a guest star also before our guest today, and that's Pippa, the husky, Siberian husky, who's in the background, probably craving Paul's company because Victoria is away in another part of the country. I think on a little bit of an AS Mum's escapade there, Paul.
No, that's correct indeed. Yes, she's over with one of the other UK AS mums, and they're having the usual womanly conflabs, shall we say. So, yeah, home alone. I've got Sebastian. Sebastian's with me, and every now and again you might just hear him shout out. But yeah, it's just me and Sebastian.
Yeah, and just while we're talking about that, Paul, and talking about stories from the journey, just in this last week, you had another visitor as well. Actually, another dad come and just catch some downtime with you.
Yeah, indeed. It was very nice, actually, Darren. I had another father from the UK come and pay us a visit. Darren Humphreys. He's got a young boy called Brody. Beautiful little boy.
You said me, Paul. What's his name?
Did I? His name was Miles. Sorry, yeah. So Miles Cave. Sorry, yeah. He's we've been in contact since 2008. We've been on this journey together, and it's just good to touch base with another dude. Gets it from the angles that dudes do. We have a Dads and Dudes site. Miles is known on that Dads and Dudes site as well. So it's just good to touch base and say hello and just share some stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about stories from the journey. Someone that I've been in contact with for a number of years now is Pam Lyman, and Pam Lyman is live on the line from us, with us from Portland in Oregon, and Pam lives there with her husband Matt and their 4 sons, Ben, Conrad, George, and Wilson. Pam joins us today to talk about her journey and to share life with us. Welcome to Alifereal, Pam.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be with both of you. It's very awesome.
Great. One of the things that I would just like to plug right at the beginning, and I know that on Facebook I've posted some things as well, and I know it's backwards now because of my web camera. And this is Pam's book called In the Company of Angels. I remember when Pam first put out information, probably actually on the listserv, Pam, would that be right? When you first started garnering interest about people willing to share about their stories. So this great book that's available, probably the best place might be Amazon.com. There'll be a link down below at the end of the interview. Pam shared something of her story and an opportunity for other people to share their stories as well. In the foreword of your book, Pam, you talked about that you wanted to know that one could have a normal life despite a diagnosis of Angelman Syndrome. Take us back, if you will, a little bit and tell us about some things that led up to Connie being diagnosed with Angelman Syndrome.
All right. So Ben was around a year and a half, and he was one of those kids that did everything quickly. He learned how to walk very early. He crawled, he rolled over, he picked up toys, he fed himself with a bottle very early on, was holding everything. And then our sweet Conrad came along, and he was so different, so different. He was, I wouldn't say lazy, but he just seemed content to just, yeah, I don't really want to hold that. I'm not really interested in rolling over, and I really am not interested in sitting up. And he would also do this other thing. You know when you hold a baby and you hold them up like this and they put their legs down and they stand on you? Well, Conrad never did that. He would always, we called him like little chicken legs. He'd always have his legs bent up like this. And that was really odd to me. And I thought maybe something's wrong with his legs, and maybe I just wasn't had on my dad's side who has cerebral palsy, and I'd only met her a couple of times, and she had a difficult time walking, and it had affected her legs, and I thought maybe he's got cerebral palsy, and then I pushed it to the back of my mind because I thought he's too little, I don't want to be thinking about that, maybe Conrad's just different. And also my husband Matt he just said, Pam, he's just a different boy. He's totally different. He's not going to be like Ben. He's not going to be doing everything like Ben. And we just have to accept that this is how Conrad is. And I don't know if it was mother's intuition or what it was, but I just kept thinking, there's just something not quite right. And then the other thing that he would do is the boys shared a room, and Ben was in a regular bed, and then Conrad was in a crib. And you know, when babies are crying, you go in and you pick them up, and you have to console them and calm them down. And it doesn't take an instant to do it. With Conrad, it was an instant. You'd go in, and he'd be happy, and just this light would turn on, and he was just like, I'm so happy to see you. You're here. Hold me. And then it was just such an extreme from sad to happy. And I thought, oh man, that's not quite right. And I just kept thinking that's not quite right. And Matt's again. And I don't know, we haven't really talked that much about it because it was such a difficult time to think that something was wrong with your child. No one ever wants to go there. No one ever wants to think that there's something, wrong with your child because you love them. But at the same time, I just kind of knew. And when he was 6 months old, I took him in. It was around 6 months old that I really knew something was not quite right, and I just kind of pushed it to the back of my mind because Matt was so convinced that because Conrad was just a different child, that there was nothing wrong with him, that he was just Connie. And so I think it was at Ben's, I don't know what they call it in the UK and in New Zealand, but they call it a well baby check. So you go in like yearly or every couple of years. And so Ben was going in for his yearly checkup, and I had Conrad with me, and I took Conrad, and after Ben's appointment was finished, I asked the doctor, I said, I'm really concerned about this long list that I had, and the doctor said, well, come back. It was a year and a half when he was officially diagnosed. So it was he was about a year, almost a year and a half when I went back to the doctor. And I write about it in the book and how the doctor held Conrad in these big hands, and he's an older doctor and he's seen everything, so I felt really comfortable with him, and he was holding Conrad and moving him around really lovingly, and I could tell he knows something's not right, and I've got to be prepared for this. And I remember saying to him, he's not retarded, right? And I won't ever say that word in my life except when I'm describing that moment, because I don't like that word. And he said, so we went to a pediatric neurologist, and it was an awful experience. There was a thunderstorm going on outside, and Conrad was yelling and screaming, and he couldn't calm down. And so I didn't really know what he was talking about, and he kept talking, and I was like, I don't know what you're saying to me. Can we come back for a different appointment without Conrad? And he's like, well, I'm very busy. We can't do that. So he said, what you do is go and get a MRI. So I was like, okay. So they do think that something's wrong with his brain. And then I really thought it was cerebral palsy, because I know that when you have cerebral palsy, you've got some kind of damage to your brain. So, but he didn't have a traumatic birth. It wasn't a traumatic pregnancy. It was routine. It was just fine. And so we had we did the MRI, and called back, waited for like almost a week for the doctor to call me back, and he didn't. So I'm like, I'm gonna call. So I called, because I'm, you're sitting on pins and needles waiting, and so I called back, and the nurse said, oh, he's on vacation. And I was like, really? Okay. When is he gonna be back? And she's like, well, he's not gonna be back for a few days. And I said, well, my son, I've been waiting for 7 days for this call about an MRI. and I would really like to know the results because I'm just sitting here anxiously waiting. So she said, oh, I can read you the results. So she read me the results, and it was just everything is normal. You know, there's nothing wrong. And I said, okay, but there's something wrong. Like, what's the next step? So I called my...
One of those things for me, is, and it's just one of my bugbears, is that when you hear medical professionals use the term normal, because you never know in what context they're actually using the term normal. Normal for the condition, normal as in everything's normal, or, you know, and, you know, I've actually pulled up a few medical professionals myself on the term of normal. You know, and even when Vicky's had the test results back herself, you know, when she's been querying something specific, it is that it's just in itself an ambiguous term. Everything is normal, but normal out of context isn't normal. We need the context of what you mean by normal, as in there isn't a problem, or normal as in there is a problem, but it's a normal problem, or, you know. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted. I apologise. Just thought I'd share that that feeling there, because normal for me is just one of them things I just don't get at all.
I absolutely agree. I don't even understand. That shouldn't even be something that doctors say. Normal. You know, my husband, whenever people ask him how he's doing, he says normal, just to screw with people because, you know, I'm normal. Well, what does that even mean? I don't know. So anyway, so I went back to my doctor with the test. I think they had sent him the test results, and so I called him, and he said, you need to set up this appointment with this, it's this really long name, and I always get the acronym wrong, but it's like Children's Rehabilitation, this long name. It's in my book. I'm so sorry, I can't remember the long name. But anyway, so it's this very long appointment, and you're there for 4 to 5 hours, and you have to be there very early in the morning. So we got there, I don't know, 8 o'clock, and it was Matt and me and Conrad, and we got there, and they take you through all these different rooms where you see a hearing specialist, a speech specialist, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and then and there's one more. I think it's just a pediatric sort of like the big pediatric guy who deals with kids with disabilities. And so we did each of the little rooms, and Conrad's such a flirt that he was, you know, winning everyone over just by, you know, loving and being cute and giggly and all that. But what was really hard is the things that they were asking him to do were so simplistic, like grabbing a toy and putting it in something. He couldn't do that. Pulling a string, like he couldn't follow directions or mimic what someone was doing. And that was really hard because then I could see he's not doing the things that they want him to do. And you want your child to do well. You want, you know, you're proud of your children and you want them to do well, and you kind of want them to show off a bit. You know, you want to show them off. And I thought, oh, this is really hard because he's not doing what it is, and they're just like furiously writing notes as, you know, as it's going on. And then they said, okay, we're going to all deliberate. So all the specialists all deliberated. They said we're gonna need about 45 minutes to an hour. So you guys go and eat. And I'm like I can eat anything. So I remember we went down to the hospital cafeteria, and I think I choked down a sandwich or something, and we had Conrad, and we were sitting there, and I just remember looking at this sweet, lovely boy, and just the fate was in these doctors' hands, and it was so scary and frightening, and, you know, just all of those things. And Matt still said, I don't think they're going to find anything wrong with him. I think they're just going to find that he's just a little bit delayed. And I just remember thinking to myself, oh, Matt, you are about to have your world rocked. Like, you have no idea. I just knew. I just really knew. I had no idea what they were going to say. I kind of thought they were going to say cerebral palsy because, you know, I'd been thinking that for so long. So I was kind of prepared for them to say that, and then I kind of already accepted that that's what it was. And so we went into the room, and we sat down at this giant conference table, and we had all the doctors around, and the one woman who was kind of the head of the team, she said, "We think your son has something called Angelman Syndrome." And Matt and I were like, "What now? Angelman Syndrome? What?" We'd never heard of it. And she handed me a flyer, tri-fold, with really no information on it. It was mostly just like the, what's the word? Like the characteristics of someone who has AS. And she said, "What we need you to do is we need you to go downstairs to the lab, and Conrad needs to, he needs to donate or have a blood test. And then they do, here it's called a fish probe, where they light up your DNA, and then if you have AS because of the deletion." So we went downstairs and did that, and I remember Matt had to go back to work, and so I had to drive home by myself with Conrad, and my mother-in-law was watching Ben at home, and I was just totally numb, and I pretty much knew at that point that that's what it was, and it was just this numbing feeling.
So, how did Matt take the news? I mean, did you and Matt both go together, or did you both go in separate directions? What described that journey home? I mean, what was the conversation point between you and Matt? What was the immediate impact to the family once you'd received notification it's Angelman syndrome? You don't know anything about it. Panic, fear, all of those?
Well, he had to go to work, and so we were in the parking lot, and we had a teeny little Honda Civic car, and so we're standing by our car. It was kind of a beat-up little car, and I just remember thinking, I'm putting this precious boy in this beat-up car, and our world has been changed, and it just, I don't know, one of my good friends who lost his father died at a young age, and he said, "I remember the day that my dad died and coming out of the hospital, and the world was going on around him." And he said, "Don't they know what's just happened? That my father, who I just love and adore, has died, and the world is going on. Everything's going on." So it kind of felt like that. It kind of felt like, when you're underwater and all the sounds are kind of muted. It kind of felt like that, like kind of a rushing feeling. And I remember Matt and I hugged, and he had to go to work, and I was kind of mad at him that he had to leave because we'd just been handed this, this news, but it wasn't official. So I think maybe he was holding back a bit, because I don't know, how do you process something like that? I mean, Conrad's 13 now, and I'm still processing it, I think. So, but I drove home, and I saw my mother-in-law, and she didn't really believe it. She didn't believe the diagnosis. She just said, "Nope, he's going to be fine, and that's not what it is, it's something else." And it felt like I was the only one that really kind of knew, and really, I mean, I knew, but I kind of just accepted it, and I had to accept it because I had to move on. I had Ben, and I didn't have the twins yet, but I just felt like I just had to accept it. So when we actually got the formal diagnosis, it's interesting because Matt and I, we both love Conrad. I guess, I don't know how to describe it. He just fully accepts Conrad for who he is and what he can do, and of course it's very hard, and but he just kind of is like, okay, it's what it is. We're just moving on. And now with all of these like Pod and Pro Loco to Go and all of these speech apps and programs that are coming out, I feel like we've got to get Conrad on the ball. He knows so much more than we think he does, and he's so much more aware, and we need him to be able to tell us really what he's thinking. And it's not that he's not on board, I just think that he's just like, Conrad is here, and we love him, and he loves us, and he's safe, he's a loving family, and he just accepts it. I don't often talk to him about how hard it is. And when I do, it's kind of at the brink of stress, and then we talk. But we don't on a regular basis talk about, you know, how hard it is. So, I don't know. What about you guys?
Sometimes it actually takes other people, a prompting sometimes from other people to say, have you sat down or have you talked about it? I think we find ourselves sometimes in that fight or flight sort of situation, and it can be really hard to sometimes be attentive. And sometimes, I think, as we heard Rita share a couple of episodes ago when we were talking, that sometimes husbands and wives or partners can pass one another in the night. There can also be those places where dads connect with dads or mums connect with mums in a way. And but I think spouses often hear or appreciate things more than we actually realise. That's one of the things I think that Rita had shared about as well, is that although it may not be verbalised, that there is an understanding or an awareness of things that are going on. Often, you know, we don't stop and think about the fact that we need to stop and think and talk about some of those sorts of things, because ultimately in the bottom of that one is often the challenges and risks to relationships as well.
No, just to come in there, Darren, as well, and I think it's an interesting perspective, because I think there are, you know, just to play to your own point there about, you know, and to Rita's as well, like ships in the night, is that sometimes I think us fellas can sometimes get trapped into this, you know, we're the providers, we're the protectors, and sometimes, you know, we do have things to say, but maybe we don't have the social skills to say them. But as well as that, what we need to be doing is wrapping our arms around the family and showing, you know, this pillar of support kind of things, keep our mouths shut, let the women, you know, show the women that the arms are there for them to cuddle them. But what we tend to hear as well is that the women actually don't embrace quite so much, you know, the person they started on the journey with it. They tend to turn more towards the children and almost turn their back to the family as well, which is a shame, really, because, you know, the blokes bottle it all up. They try and be the calming influence for, you know, the appropriate person, and then suddenly, you know, all of that kind of changes. The communication begins to die down, and I think it's a really interesting angle. And I think, Darren, you know, as part of the Alifereal, and I know when you and I have spoken offline, that one of our ambitions is actually to bring on board some of the chats from the dads and dudes, and to actually capture not what I'm saying. I repeat this quite regularly, and I know you do as well, Darren, about dads and dudes, and it's important for us to communicate, but actually from a fella's perspective about how the, you know, the context of having a disabled child, having a family, and the behaviours that go along with that as well. And I do think that's a strong point, and I know we can have the same conversation about siblings as well, and about how siblings interact with the families as well as the disabled individuals. So I think that's certainly something that I give, you know, full weight behind. So go on, Darren.
Sure. Maybe I can quote something just from the beginning of the forward from In the Company of Angels, and ask you if there was some encouragement that you'd like to give to parents who might be watching Alifereal today who've had a recent diagnosis, or something you maybe like to say to any clinicians that might be watching this as well, because I hear you've had a rough sort of time in terms of how things are communicated. I quote you as saying, after the diagnosis of Conrad, I immediately began to look for books on Angelman syndrome. I wanted to read someone else's story about how they were raising a child with Angelman syndrome. I wanted to know that one could have a normal life having a disabled child. I wanted to know how siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends handled this experience. I needed to know that my new life was manageable and doable, and could be somewhat, in the italics, normal. I hungered for the reassurance I could mother a child with a disability. And you go on, and you wanted to talk about hearing other people's stories, and that's really the crux of you beginning to share about your story and put those things out. It's the same reason that Paul and I are looking to try and record some things as well. What would be some things that you would share with some newly diagnosed parents that would actually see that life is doable, or is there something on reflection that if there was a clinician or a neurologist or a geneticist watching this, that you would want to give them some feedback on how to give that diagnosis or make that transition or present that sort of things to parents, Pam?
So before I answer that, I had a thought while you guys were talking that I think Matt doesn't talk about Conrad very much to others or voice his opinion because, oh, here it comes. He looks at Conrad as sacred. He looks at him as a sacred individual who, you know, we've been blessed, very, very blessed, and very, very lucky to have in our lives. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is I didn't know this, but he travels quite a bit for work. And I mean, I know he travels for work, but when he travels for work and people want to know, you know, how many kids do you have? Do you have kids? All that kind of stuff. He never says, I have a child with disabilities, unless it comes up. He never ever says, I've got Ben, then I have Conrad, oh, and he has Angelman syndrome, and then I have twins. It's never, it's just Conrad. And I don't know if for him it's kind of a non-issue with him. Like, I don't know. We'll have to ask him. Maybe you should interview him as one of the dads, and then we can find out. But I always think that's kind of interesting. But Conrad's just always been just a part of our family, and you know, we don't need to say, you know, I'm Pam, I'm addicted to chocolate. I could just say I'm Pam and, you know, move on or whatever. But a couple things in reflection that would be really, really lovely and helpful to those people who've been diagnosed. Support groups, a list of support groups, websites, even if they had a person available, like a counselor, like a grief counselor that was available at the hospital for free, so that these parents could go and cry on a shoulder and or have a connection with someone whose child has that exact diagnosis, who they could go and talk to. I remember the first time I met another Angelman boy. I'm from Canada, and I was up visiting my parents, and I got in contact. Actually, it's Dennis Tetreault who wrote a poem in my book, and we were connected somehow, and he said, you should come visit me, come meet Kyle. And so I went down and visited him, and Kyle was significantly more, I guess, he has scoliosis really bad, so he couldn't really stand up on his own. He had a really difficult time walking. And at the time, Conrad was almost 4, so he wasn't walking yet on his own. And I remember meeting Kyle, and just Matt and I just looked at each other, and we just wanted to bawl, because there's this 25, I think he was 25, anyway, between 22 and 25-year-old boy, lovely, gorgeous child, and who was in the backyard at his parents' house playing in this big, like, pool of water with baby toys. And it was really, really tough, because I thought, is that my future? Is that all Conrad's going to be able to do? It was really scary and really frightening. But as I got to know him, and as I got to know his parents, I realized that wasn't the whole picture. It was just a tiny, tiny smidgen of his life. And it was at the end of the day. He was tired, and we all know Angelman kids love water, and so that was really frightening at first. And I've come a long way now, because I've had a lot of years now with Conrad. But I think that I actually would like to have my book available at the hospital. That's one thing that I need to pursue, because it seems like more and more people are getting diagnosed with Angelman syndrome. And my book isn't just for kids with Angelman syndrome, because after Conrad was diagnosed, I read books about Down syndrome, autism, Asperger's, cerebral palsy, and they all helped me realize that most of the time, I don't know what I would say the percent would be, we love our kids so much, we want them to do well, and we want society to accept them. And we just want them to be looked at as normal kids, normal people who, I mean, we're not all normal. I hate that word, but you know what I mean? Just we want to be accepted and loved for who we are.
No, absolutely, and I'm completely with you, and I know Darren and I again have spoken about this offline. Is that while we do these interviews, and we're doing these interviews with Angelman's parents, between us, we both understand that actually the stories and the journeys could be about any disability, and it's not necessarily about the symptoms of the disability, but it's about them commonalities, those touch points in the families and individuals themselves in terms of the journeys they have. You know, if they get the diagnosis, it's not a great experience. They turn that negative into a positive, and then they grow as a family. And you know, sometimes the families might go in different directions or whatever, but those touch points tend to be the same touch points and the commonalities across all of those conditions. And you know, maybe at some point in time we're going to this is maybe not a promise, but something we could do in terms of diversifying the conditions and the people we're talking about. And I think there would be, and you know, come in here at any point, Darren, I think there would be an agreement that even if we were to diversify, we would still see them commonalities in terms of the journeys and people's experiences, and just being able to say, well, actually, you know, it doesn't matter about the context of the condition as in your book, Pam, but actually what people are saying in context in that book actually is the same that each and every individual person goes through. And just to come back to your point there about your husband, you know, fiercely protective, you know, of your boy, I completely get it. And I actually just welled up for a moment as you said that, because I've got another little boy, Harrison, and I'm exactly the same with Sebastian. I'm so overprotective of him, but in a really nonchalant way, you know. I'll bottle it, and then I'll try and like disseminate it in other areas, and then, you know, so work is a good thing for me to actually do that and to control that. But I think that's a really strong point, because I can relate to that. Sorry, Darren, I know you want to jump in there. Go for it.
Sure. One of the things that I'd like to ask you about, Pam, is about hope, because probably two things. One is about hope, and one is about faith that you write in the book. In the book, I just want to quote you as well, because I think you've captured some things just really in a great way. You've written, in this life, Conrad is an immeasurable gift. What seems a challenge is in fact an opportunity. What seems a sacrifice is in truth a blessing. I am as a mother, we are as a family stronger in every way because Conrad chose to be part of our lives. And I wondered if you just talk about a bit about how hope features on the journey, or how something obviously in the background of faith and of your spiritual journey actually has had an impact on your journey with Connie, and how you view and see him.
So I'm a Latter-day Saint Mormon, and as members of the Mormon faith, we have a strong belief that we lived before, and we come to Earth, and then we're going to live again. And I don't know why, and I probably won't know until I die, but I feel that Conrad was sent in a protected body, and that he was sent here, I don't want to say, like, it just seems like his spirit is perfect. Everything about those angel kids, just, there's something about them that's just, like, all the children that I've met with disabilities, they've got something that we don't necessarily have, that we kind of spend our life trying to get. You know, this unfailing love that they seem to have for people, and I don't know, I just and I know in my heart that that Elijah is whole, and he's not, you know, he doesn't have AS anymore. And I know that, and so that's part of the hope that I talk about. And I know for people, they, you know, that don't have that kind of faith, that they do have a sort of hope that one day either their children will be cured, there will be something to help their children, or that when they die, they will get a relief from this difficult life that they have. And I just think that if you don't have hope, what do you have? I mean, there's just, you have to have hope. You have to hope for a better day. For example, we were, speaking of normal activities, there's so many things that we can't do. And like the list is so long of activities that we can't do as a family. And because we're selfish beings, and I'm very, very selfish, I kind of had this idea when I got married and had kids that there were all these things that I was going to do. We were going to go camping, and we were going to have a trailer, and we were going to have a motorhome, and we'd just go at the drop of a hat and we'd do all these things. Well, Conrad has given me a lot of pause, and a lot of pause in what's important. And so we do travel, but it's very, very limited. We just went to Sun River, Oregon, which is a fantastic place, and we went with my mother and Matt's mom and his brother and wife, and they also have 4 boys. So we all went together, and we were just beside ourselves with stress because not only do we have a son with extreme disabilities and very special needs, he doesn't sleep. So where was he going to sleep? So a couple years ago, we had this crazy idea because we used Matt's parents are divorced, and so every other year we go on a family vacation with his father and his stepmother and their kids, and we go usually to a place that has it's like little apartments, so you each have your own little condo, and we would always take one room for Conrad, and we would like barricade the whole room. We'd like move the entertainment center and put the bed up on the side, and so he'd have like this little triangle where he could sleep, and we'd have to kind of take the room apart basically, and then set up the TV, and we have this drive that has like 100 movies on it, and have that set up, and make sure that he can't reach it or pull the cords down or break the TV or push the mattress over. I mean, it's just it's just hard. And so and then give him maybe 2 Unisom to sleep at night if he even fell asleep. So we'd have to barricade him in this room, and every time I go on a trip, I have such guilt because I think to myself, I'm literally barricading my kid. I'm putting him in like a jail, and does he understand that it's for his safety? So I have all these thoughts that go around, and it's just, so I work myself up, and it's always fine. It ends up being fine. So this last trip, we went to Sun River, and we stayed in this kind of big kind of home, and we're like, where are we going to put Conrad? So there was a master closet that had a sliding door on it. So we had a tent. We put Conrad in the tent. We had his TV set up, and then we had to lock the tent door so that he couldn't get out. And that whole first night, he just cried until about 3 in the morning. And I was a wreck. I was just an absolute wreck. And I just went to bed because I couldn't, we got him up and consoled him. Are you hungry? Are you hurt? Are you too hot? But he just was like, this is new. We haven't done this in a while. I'm really kind of mad at you, and I'm going to let you know. So I remember Matt coming in and just sitting with me and saying, Pam, Conrad is fine. He's just a little upset, but he's going to be fine. And that helped me because, with kids, when you travel, a lot of times they are upset when it's not a new place. So now I've lost my train of thought about where that question was going. But were we talking about having a normal life?
Yeah, I think we were. Tell us something about the journey to putting In the Company of Angels together.
So I'm an information hog. So after Conrad was diagnosed, even before he was officially diagnosed, I went looking on, the Google machine and started looking for anything on AS, and there was nothing. There was nothing out there at all. And what there was just little tidbits here and there. And I was like, I need something real. I need a book by a parent, because all the books that I'd read previous were all written by parents caregivers or that had some sort of context with living with the day-to-day grind. And I wanted to know that I could do it. I wanted to know, I mean, I knew it was going to be hard. I knew that. But I wanted, like, some hope. I wanted to know that it wasn't bleak, that it could be fun, and of course it was going to be difficult, but that was kind of the drive. So I was talking to my mother-in-law, who is one of these women who her motto is you can do hard things. And so I was talking to her and she's like, well, duh, I think you're supposed to write the book. And I remember just laughing and laughing. And I was like, are you kidding me? What? And that was it. I just left it. And I think it was within the week after I'd had this conversation with my mother-in-law that I was talking to my mom. And my mom said, well, if you're not going to write it, who is? You can't wait around for this book to get written. And so I thought, wow, okay. I mean, because I didn't have enough experience. I was looking for people who had more experience with kids with Angelman syndrome. And I thought, well, the best way to do that is to reach out and find other people that have experience and then compile it in a book and try to get it published. And so I was in contact with the Canadian Angelman Syndrome Society, and I wrote to them and I told her of my project, and they do a quarterly kind of email that they send out, you know, of little stories. And it wasn't really something that I had been interested in yet, because I didn't have enough experience. So I wrote to her and I said, so I have this idea and I want to write a book and I have this letter. Could you put it in one of your flyers, your email flyers? And she said, that is such a great idea. Let's do it. So I had support from her. Then I got in contact with the Angelman Syndrome Foundation in the States, and then they put it in their kind of flyer thing that they send out to parents with Angelman syndrome. And then I got on a listserv, and I think that's where I found you, Darren. Is that how you found me? So I just kind of put it out in the universe, and almost immediately I started getting emails. And I actually had one phone call from this woman in New Brunswick, and she called me, and it was really funny because my husband answered the phone and he's like, I don't know what language this person is speaking, because in Eastern Canada they have a really strong accent. So I talked to her and she was beside herself excited and her story's in the book, and I cannot remember her last name, but she sent me just this beautiful, like 5-page essay that she wrote, and she sent me pictures and where to put the pictures chronologically, and she was just so excited. And she said, if there had been a book like this when my son was diagnosed, it would have meant the world to me. And she said, even though my son is in his 20s now, I'm just going to read this. I just love this book. So that's kind of how it got started. I was completely overwhelmed and very humbled by how many people said to me, this book is a long time coming. We've really needed a book like this. And, you know, I really feel like I was just the instrument. Everyone has a story to tell, and I learned so much from all of the other people that submitted stories.
No, it's good. And for me, you started off with this for a purpose, which was to know that for yourself and for your family and for Conrad that there was hope. And you'd obviously, at that point, in your own mind's eye, and I could be wrong here, I'm kind of going off on one of my own journeys again, is that in your own mind's eye, you've kind of painted the picture of a bleak, a bleak dystopian society where, disability plays a fact in everything. And so your journey is to actually go out, find those hurdles, get over those hurdles by hearing other people's stories. Did pulling that book together help you and I call it the grieving process, and I don't really like using that term, but did it help you get over the grieving process? Did it help paint the right pictures for you? Tell us a little bit about what it did for you and how you think it does add value to other families, and does it do the same?
So when I started getting emails and letters, I was giddy. I was so giddy and so excited that people were interested, for one, and that they felt that the book was worthy of being written, and that people wanted to tell their stories not for their own benefit but for the benefit of others. And I remember just, I mean, for months I was inundated with piles of emails and, you know, editing them and seeing which ones would work and which ones wouldn't, and it really actually helped me, because most of the emails that I got, a lot of the emails that I got were from people who had been doing this for a while, and they were doing it. Like, they were doing it. They were okay. They weren't in a loony bin. They weren't severely depressed, and you know, they were doing it, and they were finding joy in the journey, and they were doing it, and it really helped me decide to do it, and to decide to, okay, this is my life. I can do it. There are other people out there doing it, and it's hard, but it also gave me this huge network of other people that were out there, and I, you know, feeling connected to, it's like in a foreign country and you find someone else who speaks the same language, and finding these other parents that I could actually call or email or say, I'm having problems potty training. Did you even do this? Is this even something that we can do? What about sleep? So I had this whole other network of parents that I could talk to with problems that I was going through. That, so it was like a spiral, like a snowball effect. I had parents who were helping me because they had already done it, and then I was at one point, and then I was helping the people below me kind of come up throughout the ages. So it was just an incredible experience, and I'm just so lucky that it got published. It was very hard to get it published, actually. It's a self-published book, and so I had to pay to have it published, and you know, it's expensive to publish a book, and what I really wanted to do was, the proceeds of my book, I wanted to give back to some of the different foundations that helped me publish the book, you know, by putting out my letter. And I haven't been able to do that, and I feel really sad about that, because, you know, that was really one of the things that I really wanted to do. So, like, I'll make a royalty, and it's like 18 cents.
I think maybe part of the value isn't necessarily a monetary value in terms of what you've done and about the journey you've been on. The value is to the people who pick up that book, read it, and understand the context. And I completely get where you're coming from, you know, giving the money back to those organisations, you know, who've been able to link you and connect you to those people who've, you know, but yourself and all of those people, the value they add is to touch with other parents and, you know, uniquely pass their journey on. And about what we're doing, you with your book, and what Darren and I are doing with this, is about saying to people, you know what, there is some hope. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. Yes, there are negative stories, but it's about how we approach them and how we turn over those negatives. And for me, that's where the value is. Now, we're really time pushed now, and it's a usual question for me to all of our guests. Darren's expecting it. I don't know if we've seen the question yet, but what I want you to do for me is, using your experience of pulling together all of the stories from the books that you, from all the stories for your book, and also from your journey, if you got in a time machine and went back 10 years, 13 years, 14 years, what would you tell yourself about what you've learned on that journey? What would be 3 things that you'd either tell yourself or tell other people?
Okay, so I wish I had that question about 5 weeks before, because I could have thought of something really awesome. So one thing for sure that I can say is, you have to understand that it is going to be hard, but you can do it. And there will be days when you are on your knees asking, why is this happening? And I don't like asking the question, why is it happening to me? Because I don't want it to be happening to anyone else. But what am I supposed to be learning from this? And there's new things that I learn all the time. So one is know that it's going to be hard and know that you can do it. So those two together. The second is have a sense of humor. You really have to have a sense of humor, because if you don't, you'll just be crying all the time. There's just so many times where just something just ridiculous happens, and it's so awful that it has to be comical. You know, you have to find the humor in it. And also, what else would I say? I think the other thing that I have several things I could say, but one, for some reason, is coming to the top of my mind, is going back to what Matt said about, you know, these children being sacred and special, and you know, who are these kids? Like, who really are they, that they've come in these sort of protected bodies, and they're here to teach us so many things. They've taught my boys compassion, endurance. There are so many times when I look at my boys and think, what would they be like if they didn't have this brother that pulls their hair and steps on their Legos and gets into all of their stuff, and yet they're not bothered by it. It's just part of their life now. It's just they just accept it for what it is. And of course sometimes it's hard for them and they get frustrated, but they really love their brother, and they really just accept who this boy is and what he's taught them. And I remember one night we were out for dinner, and it was like a burger place. So, you know, you've got all the tables around. It was really loud, and Conrad can't hold a burger and eat it himself. He can like pick up little pieces and feed himself, but usually Matt and I will cut it in pieces and just will give it to him on a fork. And so I think I was doing that, and Ben, our oldest son, who's 15, he was just like staring like this at this one table next to us. And I said, Ben, what's going on? Like, he just had this death stare. I was like, what is going on? He said, Mom, that kid is staring at Conrad. And I don't really notice the looks that much anymore, because it's just, this is just my normal, this is my family, and if you want to look, that's fine. You can talk to me, you can ask me questions. So, and that's fine. But Ben, it bothered him so much. He said, Mom, it's really bothering me. It's just really rude. And so, you know, he also holds Conrad as sacred, and he was talking to one of his friends once about Conrad. He came up in conversation, and Ben just said, Mom, Conrad's just awesome. He's just the best. I just love him so much. And so, yeah.
It's about that time again, a little bit like the Mickey Mouse show. We'd probably like to talk to you, Pam, for another hour even. I just want to express my sincere thanks for taking time to be with us today, and for sharing your experience and your perspective and your paradigm and the dynamics of your family, and about how the book came about. Can't help but promote in the company of angels even more for you to get your hands on, so that you can pass out to your family and your friends, or you can help generate more royalty so that some of that money can go back to the foundations who've helped things as well. So you've been with Paul Boone and in the UK, and Darren Humphreys on Alifereal, an initiative to tell stories from the journey. If you're interested in what we've been sharing about today and want to hear some more, don't hesitate down here to subscribe or to leave your comments as well. Comments to do, or even questions for Pam about her story today. Going to sign off fairly shortly. I'll leave it to Paul to wrap up. Are there any final things you'd like to share with us, Pam, before we close off the conversation today?
Oh, well, it's been a real honor to talk to you, and I have some things that I'd like to say to you, and I won't say them online. We'll talk after. But thank you so much. You've been such a great supporter of my book, and I'm so excited to talk to you and all the work that you're doing, and I love that you're getting the book out there, and interviewing all these other wonderful parents, and I just love the AS community. We're strong and we're fun, and it's just been great. And I really hope that I've said something that has helped someone, and go read the book. It's a good one. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Paul.
No, thank you, Pam, and seriously, thank you very much for being our guest today. It's been an absolute honour hearing, you know, we've only heard a short part of your story, but it's a really important journey. And you know, you know, I've not got your book, Pam, but it makes me want to go out there and pick up the book and read it. I'm sure there's going to be something in there as well that we can relate to. All of us. I've realised all throughout the interview, I've been writing notes, Pam, about the things you've been saying, and I've got tons and tons of questions, but I've been using an Assert pen, which is the Angelman Syndrome group here in the UK, and I don't just realised halfway through, so there you go. Bit of a plug there for Assert. Darren, it's been a pleasure. I know you've got to go. I've got more questions, Pam, and I'm sure at some point Darren and I are going to ask you to come back, and we'll pick up from really where we are now, really, and maybe ask what's in the pipeline for the future, because I'm sure this also has probably given you some thoughts about where you can take your next endeavour as well. But Darren, thank you, Pam, and thank you everybody. As Darren's already said, click the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it on Facebook when you see it, pass it around your friends and your family. Alifereal is all about sharing the journey, it's all about telling the stories, and it's all about connecting our community together. So thank you very much for that.